Happy Friday. Oh, hey. Mom's like, I'm here. Let's go. Let's go on now. Yes, you're here. Thank you for being here today, Moms. Hey, guys. Welcome back. It's quarantine story time. I'm Charlotte, and we are here to read some more books. And by books, I mean this one book that weighs 4 pounds, and we're only a tenth of the way through. Okay, right now, maybe we're 2/10 of the way through. No, not really, but close. Close. It's about, what did I say? It's like a 1,200 page book. We're on page 208, so not even 2/10. But that's all right. It's all right. We're getting there. We're making progress. We're doing our part to flatten the curve, keep people safe, and, keep loved ones safe, give our healthcare workers a chance, all that good stuff. So we're here. And we're edifying our minds right now with classic literature that we would never have taken time to read otherwise. So double win, triple win, and speaking of double and triple, we are now in volume 1, part 3. And we're going to read sections 2 and 3 today. And they're kind of long, so sorry. So I guess that'll make up for some shorter readings we've had recently. Hopefully my arm strength holds up. So we have, if you were here last time, we have, as we started part 3, we have jumped back to Moscow and Petersburg for what's happening in the courts and the social circles of the Russian elite at the time. And it's late 1805. Pierre has inherited his father's fortune, and what else? Everyone who was kind of snubbing him before is suddenly like his biggest fan. No surprise. And now that he's like one of the richest men in Russian society, and Prince Vasily is suddenly also his dearest friend and trying his best to do all that he can for him. And everyone, the princesses who snubbed him before are now like so sorry and so sweet and we're family and yada, 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 whatever. And Prince Vasily wants Pierre to marry his daughter, Helene, and everyone's kind of conspiring to make it happen. And Pierre's been kind of oblivious, sort of, just like, oh, whatever. And like, oh, yeah, she's pretty. And then at a party, he notices that he sees her as pretty, but then he's like, realizes like, oh, wait, she's a woman and she's beautiful and I could marry her and she could be my wife. And he's kind of like, something about this feels wrong. But he's like, but I could marry her. So that's where we are. He's kind of doing something doesn't seem right, but I could marry her. Boobs. Men. Sorry, I never got the fascination. What am I going to say? Different strokes for different folks. So that's my sum up. If you'd like a better review, I would recommend looking at my playlist for War and Peace and listening to the past episodes. So thanks. Also, subscribe because it's fun. Yay! I'm here every weekday around 3 p.m., as close to 3 p.m. as possible, except for when I take a nap or something and miss it. But I'm here weekdays, Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. until further notice, or until the next 1,000 pages get finished. And so yeah, let's jump in. Still working on possibly getting another microphone, so hopefully the sound quality will be better in the future. And I have to organize something put something here because it's really distracting to see my face in front of myself. So then I end up looking at that instead of the camera. I have the live chat up, so pop a line, say hi, ask any questions. If I can, I will answer them. But maybe try to keep the questions related to the War and Peace. And we'll see what happens. All right, too much ado. Let's go. Volume 1, Part 3, Section 2. In November of 1805, Prince Vasily was to go to inspect 4 provinces. He arranged this assignment for himself so as to visit his disordered estates at the same time, and having picked up his son Anatoly, where his regiment was stationed, to go with him to see Prince Nikolai Andreevich Volokhonsky in order to marry his son to the daughter of this rich old man. But before his departure and these new affairs, Prince Vasily had to decide things with Pierre, who, of late, had indeed been spending whole days at home, that is, at Prince Vasily's, where he lived, and who was ridiculous, agitated, and stupid, as a man in love ought to be, in Helene's presence, but had still not made a proposal. Tout c'est bel et bon, mais il faut que se finisse, Prince Vasily said to himself one morning with a sad sigh, conscious that Pierre, who owed so much to him, well, Christ be with him, was not quite acting properly in this matter. Youth, frivolity. Well, God be with him, thought Prince Vasily, pleasantly aware of his kindness. Mais il faut que se finisse. The day after tomorrow is Layla's name day. I'll invite people, and if he doesn't understand what he ought to do, then I will make it my business. Yes, my business. I'm a father. In the month and a half since Anna Pavlovna's soiree, followed by the sleepless, agitated nights in which he decided that marriage to Helene would be a misfortune and that he must avoid her and go away, Pierre, after this decision, did not move out of Prince Vasily's house and felt with horror that in people's eyes he was becoming more and more bound to her every day, that he simply could not go back to his former view of her, nor could he tear himself away from her, that it would be terrible, but that he would have to bind his fate to hers. He might perhaps have refrained, but not a day passed without Prince Vasily, who rarely held receptions, having a soiree at which Pierre had to be present, if he did not want to spoil the general pleasure and disappoint everyone's expectations. Prince Vasily, in those rare moments when he was at home, would pass by Pierre, put his hand downwards, distractedly offer him his clean-shaven, wrinkled cheek to kiss, and say either, "See you tomorrow," or at dinner, otherwise I won't see you," or "I'm staying for your sake," and so on. But despite the fact that when Prince Vasily stayed for Pierre's sake, as he put it, he did not put 2 words to him, Pierre did not feel himself capable of disappointing his expectations. Every day he said one and the same thing to himself. I must finally understand her and find out for myself who she is. Was I mistaken before, or am I mistaken now? No, she's not stupid. No, she's a wonderful girl, he sometimes said to himself. She's never mistaken in anything. She never says anything stupid. She speaks little, but what she says is always simple and clear. So she's not stupid. She's never been embarrassed and is not embarrassed now. She's not a bad woman. It often happened when he was with her that he would begin to argue, to think aloud, and she would respond to that each time, either by a brief but appropriate remark, showing that it did not interest her, or by a slight smiling glance which showed Pierre her superiority most palpably. She was right in considering all arguments as nonsense compared with that smile. She always addressed him with a joyful, trusting smile meant for him alone, in which there was something more significant than what was in the general smile that always adorned her face. Pierre knew that everyone was only waiting for him to finally say one word, to cross a certain line, and he knew that sooner or later he would cross it, but some incomprehensible terror seized him at the mere thought of that frightful step. 1,000 times in the course of that month and a half, all the while feeling himself drawn more and more into that frightening abyss, Pierre had said to himself, "But what is it? I need resolve. Don't I have any?" He wanted to resolve it, but felt with terror that in this case he lacked the resolve that he knew he had, and that indeed was in him. Pierre was one of those people who are strong only when they feel themselves perfectly pure. And since the day when he had been possessed by that feeling of desire which he had experienced over the snuff-box at Anna Pavlovna's, an unconscious feeling of guilt on account of that attraction had paralyzed his resolve. On Helene's name day, a small company of friends and relations, the closest people, as the prince put it, had supper at Prince Vasily's. All these friends and relations had given the feeling that the name day girl's lot was to be decided that day. The guests were sitting over supper. Princess Korrigan, a massive, once beautiful, imposing woman, presided as mistress of the house. On either side of her sat the guests of honor, an old general, his wife, and Anna Pavlovna Scherer. At the end of the table sat the less old, and honored guests, and there also, as part of the household, sat Pierre and Helene next to each other. Prince Vasily did not eat. He strolled around the table in a merry state of mind, sitting down now with one, now with another of the guests. To each he spoke a casual and agreeable word, except for Pierre and Helene, whose presence he seemed not to notice. Prince Vasily enlivened everyone. The wax candles burned brightly, the silver and crystal, the ladies' gowns, and the gold and silver epaulets shone. Servants in red caftans scurried around the table. The sound of knives, glasses, plates were heard, and the sound of animated talk in several conversations around the table. An old chamberlain was heard at one end assuring a little old baroness of his ardent love for her, and so too was her laughter. At the other end, the story of the unsuccess of some Maria Viktorovna. At the end of the table, Prince Vasily concentrated listeners around himself. He was telling the ladies, with a jocular smile on his lips, about the latest session, on Wednesday, of the State Council, at which Sergei Kuzmich Vyats-Mitinov, the new military governor-general of Petersburg, had received and read the then-famous rescript of the sovereign Alexander Pavlovich from the army, in which the sovereign, addressing Sergei Kuzmich, said that he had received declarations of the people's devotion from all sides, and that the proclamation from Petersburg was especially pleasing to him, that he was proud of the honor of being the head of such a nation, and would try to prove worthy of it. The rescript began with the words, "Sergei Kuzmich, from all sides rumors reach me," and so on. So it never went further than Sergei Kuzmich? One lady asked. No, not a hair's width, Prince Vasily replied, laughing. Sergei Kuzmich, from all sides, Sergei Kuzmich. Poor Vyazmitinov couldn't get any further. He took up the letter several more times, but as soon as he said Sergei, sobs, Kuzmich, tears, and from all sides was drowned in weeping, and he couldn't go on. And again, his handkerchief, and again, Sergei Kuzmich from all sides, and tears, and so that they finally asked someone else to read it. Kuzmich from all sides, and tears, someone repeated, laughing. Don't be wicked, Anna Pavlovna said from the other end of the table, shaking her finger. C'est un si brave et excellent homme, notre bon Vyazmitinov. Everyone laughed a lot. At the upper, honored end of the table, everyone seemed to be merry, under the influence of the most varied, lively mood. Only Pierre and Helene sat silently next to each other at the lowest end of the table. On both their faces there was a restrained, radiant smile that had nothing to do with Sergei Kuzmich, a smile of bashfulness about their own feelings. Whatever the others said, however they laughed and joked together, whatever the appetite with which they savored the Rhine wine, the sauté, the ice cream, however they avoided glancing at this couple, however indifferent or inattentive to them they seemed, the feeling for some reason was, from the occasional glances cast at them, that the anecdote about Sergei Kuzmich and the laughter and the food were all a pretense, and all the power of attention of the entire company was directed only at this couple, Pierre and Helene. Prince Vasily imitated Sergei Kuzmich's sobbing, and at the same time shot a glance at his daughter, and all the while he laughed, the expression on his face said, Yes, it's all going well. Tonight it will be decided. Anna Pavlovna shook her finger at him for Notre bon Vyazmitinov, but in her eyes, which flashed momentarily at Prince Vasily read congratulations on his future son-in-law and his daughter's happiness. The old princess, offering wine with a sad sigh to the lady next to her, and glancing angrily at her daughter, seemed to be saying with that sigh, Yes, now you and I have nothing left but to drink sweet wine, my dear. Now it's time for these young ones to be so boldly and defiantly happy. And what stupidity all this that I'm going on about is, as if it interests me, thought the diplomat, glancing at the happy faces of the lovers. That is happiness. Amidst the insignificant trifles, the artificial interests that bound this company together, there turned up the simple feeling of attraction of a handsome and healthy young man and woman for each other. And this human feeling overwhelmed everything and soared above all this artificial babble. The jokes were not funny, the news was not interesting, the animation was obviously feigned. Not only they, but the footmen serving at the table seemed to feel the same and forgot the order of service, gazing at the beauty of Hélène with her radiant face and the red, fat, happy, and uneasy face of Pierre. It seemed that even the light of the candles was concentrated only on those two happy faces. Pierre felt that he was the center of everything, and this position delighted and embarrassed him. He found himself in the state of a man immersed in some occupation. He neither saw nor understood, nor heard everything clearly. Only rarely, unexpectedly, did fragmentary thoughts and impressions of reality flash in his soul. So it's all over, he thought, and how did it all happen? So quickly. Now I know that not for her alone, not for me alone, but for all of them, this inevitably had to come about. They all expect this so much, they're so certain it will be, that I simply cannot disappoint them. But how will it be? I don't know. But it will be without fail, thought Pierre, glancing at those shoulders gleaming just near his eyes. Then he suddenly became ashamed of something. He felt embarrassed that he alone was taking up everyone's attention, that he was a lucky fellow in the eyes of others. He, with his unattractive face, some sort of Paris taking possession of Helen. But surely it always happens that way and must be so, he comforted himself. And anyhow, what did I do for it? When did it begin? I left Moscow along with Prince Vasily. There wasn't anything yet. And then, why shouldn't I have stayed with him? Then I played cards with her, picked up her reticule, went for a ride with her. When did it begin? When did it all happen? And here he is sitting next to her, a fiancé. He hears, sees, feels her closeness, her breathing, her movements, her beauty. Now it suddenly seems to him that it is not she, but he himself who is so extraordinarily beautiful, that is why they're looking at him that way. And he, happy in this general astonishment, draws himself up, raises his head, and rejoices at his happiness. Suddenly someone's familiar voice is heard, and says something to him yet again. But Pierre is so taken up that he does not understand what is said to him. I'm asking you when you got a letter from Volokhonsky, Prince Vasily repeats for the third time. You're so distracted, my dear. Prince Vasily smiles, and Pierre sees that everyone is smiling at him and at Hélène. Well, so what if you all know, Pierre says to himself. Well, so what, it's true. And he smiles his meek, childlike smile, and Hélène smiles too. When did you get it? From Olmütz? Prince Vasily repeats, as if he needs to know in order to settle an argument. Can one really speak and think about such trifles, thinks Pierre. Yes, from Olmütz, he answers with a sigh. After supper, Pierre led his lady after the others to the drawing room. The guests began to depart, and some left without saying goodbye to Hélène, as if not wishing to tear her away from her serious occupation. Some approached for a moment and left quickly, forbidding her to see them off. The diplomat was sadly silent as he left the drawing room. He was thinking about all the vanity of his diplomatic career compared with Pierre's happiness. The old gentleman grumbled angrily at his wife when she asked him how his foot was. Ah, you old fool, he thought. Elena Sergeyevna, now she'll be the same beauty even when she's 50. It seems I can congratulate you, Anna Pavlovna whispered to the princess and kissed her warmly. If it weren't for my migraine, I would have stayed. The princess said nothing in reply. She was tormented by envy of her daughter's happiness. While the guests were taking their leave, Pierre remained alone with Hélène for a long time in the small drawing room where they were sitting. Often before, during the last month and a half, he had remained alone with Hélène, but he had never spoken to her of love. Now he felt that this was necessary, but he simply could not resolve upon this last step. He was ashamed. It seemed to him that here, besides Hélène, he was occupying someone else's place. This happiness is not for you, some inner voice was telling him. This happiness is for those who do not have what you have. But he had to say something, and so he began to speak. He asked her whether she was pleased with tonight's soirée. She answered with her usual simplicity that this name day had been one of the most pleasant for her. Some of the nearest relations were still there. They were sitting in the big drawing room. Prince Vasily walked lazily over to Pierre. Pierre stood up and said it was already late. Prince Vasily gave him a sternly questioning look, as if what he had said was so strange that he could not hear it well. But then the expression of sternness changed, and Prince Vasily pulled Pierre's arm down, seated him, and smiled gently. Well, Lelia, he at once addressed his daughter in that careless tone of habitual tenderness which is adopted by parents who have been affectionate with their children since childhood, but which Prince Vasily only approximated by means of imitating other parents. He again turned to Pierre. Sergei Kuzmich, from all sides, he said, undoing the top button of his waistcoat. Pierre smiled, but it was clear from his smile that he realized it was not the anecdote about Sergei Kuzmich that interested Prince Vasily just then. And Prince Vasily realized that Pierre realized it. Prince Vasily suddenly burbled something and left. To Pierre, it looked as if even Prince Vasily was embarrassed. The sight of this worldly old man's embarrassment touched Pierre. He glanced at Helene. She too seemed embarrassed, and her glance said, "Well, it's your own fault." I must inevitably cross it, but I can't, thought Pierre. And again he began talking about unrelated things, about Sergei Kuzmich, asking what the anecdote was because he had not heard it well. Helene replied with a smile that she did not know either. When Prince Vasily came into the drawing room, the princess was talking softly with an elderly lady about Pierre. Of course, c'est une partie très brillante, mais le bonheur, mon cher. Les mariages se font dans les cieux, the elderly lady replied. Prince Vasily, as if not listening to the ladies, went to the far corner and sat on the sofa. He closed his eyes and seemed to be dozing. His head began to nod, and he woke up. Aline, he said to his wife, allez voir ce qu'ils font. The princess went to the door, passed by it with a significant, indifferent look, and peeked in the drawing room. Pierre and Helene were sitting and talking in the same way. All the same, she said to her husband. Prince Vasily frowned, his mouth twisted to one side, his cheeks twisted with an unpleasant, coarse expression peculiar to him. He roused himself, got up, threw his head back, and with a resolute stride walked past the ladies into the small drawing room. He strode quickly, joyfully up to Pierre. The prince's expression was so extraordinarily joyful that Pierre stood up, frightened when he saw him. Thank God, he said, my wife has told me everything. He embraced Pierre with one arm and his daughter with the other. Lelia, my friend, I'm very, very glad. His voice quavered. I love your father, and she will be a good wife to you. God bless you. He embraced his daughter, and then Pierre again, and kissed him with his old man's mouth. Tears actually wet his cheeks. Princess, come here, he called. The princess came in and also wept. The elderly lady also dabbed herself with her handkerchief. They kissed Pierre, and he kissed the beautiful Helene's hand several times. After a while, they were left alone again. All this had to be so, and could not be otherwise, thought Pierre. Therefore, there's no point in asking whether it's good or bad. It's good because it's definite, and there's no more of the old tormenting doubt. Pierre silently held his fiancée's hand and looked at her beautiful breasts, rising and falling. Helene, he said aloud, and stopped. Something special is said on these occasions, he thought. But he simply could not remember precisely what was said on these occasions. He looked at her face. She moved closer to him. Her face flushed. Oh, take off those, whatever there. She was pointing to his spectacles. Pierre took off his spectacles, and his eyes, on top of the general strangeness of people's eyes when they take off their spectacles, had a frightened and questioning look. He was about to bend down to her hand and kiss it, but she, with a quick and crude movement of her head, intercepted her lips and brought them together with his own. Her face struck Pierre by its altered, unpleasantly perplexed expression. It's too late now. It's all over, and anyway, I love her, thought Pierre. Je vous aime, he said, having remembered what needed to be said on these occasions, but the words sounded so meager that he felt ashamed of himself. A month and a half later, he was married and settled down, as they say, the happy possessor of a beautiful wife and millions of rubles, and in the big, newly done-over house of the Counts Bezukhov in Petersburg. Well. Section 3. Old Prince Nikolai Andreevich Volokhonsky received a letter from Prince Vasily in December of 1805, informing him of his arrival together with his son. I'm going to an inspection, and of course for me 70 miles is no detour if I can visit you, my much esteemed benefactor, he wrote. And my Anatoly is keeping me company on his way to the army. And I hope you will allow him personally to express the deep respect which he, in imitation of his father, has for you. I know, right? That was a really quick, not sure if we're going to get engaged, and then all of a sudden, oh, so you're engaged. Okay, let's get married. What did you say, a month and a half later? Uh-huh. All right, anyways. Has for you. So Marie doesn't have to be taken out. Suitors are coming to us themselves, the little princess said indiscreetly on hearing of it. Prince Nikolai Andreich winced and said nothing. 2 weeks after the receipt of the letter, in the evening, Prince Vasily's people arrived in advance of him, and the next day he himself arrived with his son. Old Bolkonsky had always had a rather low opinion of Prince Vasily's character, and the more so in recent times when Prince Vasily, under the new reigns of Paul and Alexander, had gone far in ranks and honors. Now, from the hints in the letter and from the little princess, he understood what the matter was, and the low opinion of Prince Vasily in Prince Nikolai Andreich's soul turned into a feeling of hostile disdain. He snorted constantly when he spoke of him. On the day of Prince Vasily's arrival, Prince Nikolai Andreich was especially displeased and ill-humored. Whether he was ill-humored because of Prince Vasily was coming, or he was especially displeased about Prince Vasily's becoming because he was ill-humored, in any case, he was ill-humored, and already in the morning, Tikhon had advised the architect against going to the prince with a report. "Do you hear how his honor is walking?" Tikhon said, drawing the architect's attention to the sound of the prince's footsteps. "Stepping full on his heels. We know about that." However, as usual, after 8 o'clock, the prince went out for a walk in his velvet coat with the sable collar and matching hat. It had snowed the day before. The path on which Prince Nikolai Andreich always walked to the conservatory had been cleared. The traces of the broom could be seen on the swept snow, and a shovel had struck in one of the loosely heaped up snowbanks, and the shovel was stuck in one of the loosely heaped up snowbanks that lined both sides of the path. The prince walked through the conservatory, the servants' quarters and outbuildings, frowning and silent. "But can one get through in a sleigh?" he asked the steward, who accompanied him back to the house, a respectable man in face and manner resembling his master. "The snow is deep, Your Excellency. I've already ordered it cleared on the avenue." The prince inclined his head and went on to the porch. "Thank God," he thought the steward, "the cloud has passed." "It would have been so hard to get through, Your Excellency," the steward added. "So we've heard, Your Excellency, that a minister is going to be visiting Your Excellency?" The prince turned to the steward and fixed him with a frowning gaze. "What? A minister? What minister? Who ordered it?" He began speaking in his piercingly harsh voice. "You didn't clear it for the princess, my daughter, but for a minister. I have no ministers." "Your Excellency, I assumed—" "You assumed," cried the prince, articulating the words still more harshly and incoherently. "You assumed! Brigands! Knaves! I'll teach you to assume," and raising his stick, he swung it at Alpatych, and would have hit him if the steward had not instinctively avoided the blow. "Assumed! Knaves!" he shouted hurriedly, but even though Alpatych, frightened by his own boldness in avoiding the blow, approached the prince with his bald head obediently bowed, or perhaps precisely because of it, the prince, while shouting, "Knaves, cover the road!" did not raise his stick again and ran inside. Before dinner, the young princess and Mademoiselle Bourrienne, knowing that the prince was ill-humored, stood waiting for him. Mademoiselle Bourrienne with a beaming face which said, "I know nothing, I'm here as ever." And Prince Maria, pale, frightened, with lowered eyes. The hardest thing of all for Princess Maria, was that she knew that on these occasions she ought to behave like Mademoiselle Bourrienne, but could not do it. She imagined, "If I make as though I don't notice, he'll think I have no compassion for him. If I make as if I myself am dull and ill-humored, he'll say, as has happened, that I'm moping," and so on. The prince looked at his daughter's frightened face and snorted. "Tra, or a dimwit," he said. "And the other one's not here. They've already spread the gossip," he thought about the little princess, who was not in the dining room. "And where is the princess?" he asked. "Hiding?" "She's not quite well," Mademoiselle Bourrienne replied with a cheerful smile. "She won't be coming out. It's so understandable in her condition." "Hem, hem, huff, huff," said the prince, and sat down at the table. His plate did not seem clean to him. He pointed to a spot and flung it aside. Tikhon caught it and handed it to the butler. The little princess was not unwell, but her fear of the prince was so insuperable that, on learning that he was ill-humored, she decided not to come out. "I'm afraid for the baby," she said to Mademoiselle Bourrienne. "God knows what fright may do." In general, the little princess lived at Bald Hills under a constant feeling of fear and antipathy for the old prince, though she was not aware of the antipathy because the fear was so predominant that she could not feel it. On the prince's side there was also antipathy, but it was smothered by contempt. The princess, having made herself at home at Bald Hills, had especially grown to love Mademoiselle Bourrienne, spent whole days with her, invited her to sleep in her room, and often talked with her about her father-in-law, criticizing him. "Il nous arrive de monde, mon prince," said Mademoiselle Bourrienne, unfolding a white napkin with her pink little hands. "Son Excellence la Prince Corrigan avec son fils. À ce que j'ai entendu dire," she said questioningly. This Excellence is a little brat. I solicited his post for him in the ministry," the prince said peevishly, "and why the son I cannot comprehend." Princess Lizaveta Karlovna and Princess Maria may know, but I don't know why they're bringing this son here. I have no need of him." And he looked at his blushing daughter. "Unwell, are you? Afraid of the minister, as that blockhead Alpatych said today?" "No, mon Pierre." Unfortunate as Mademoiselle Bourrienne's choice of subject had been, she did not stop and babbled about the conservatory, about the beauty of the newly opened flower, and about the soup the prince relented. And after the soup, the prince relented. After dinner, he went to see his daughter-in-law. The little princess was sitting at a small table, chatting with the maid, Masha. She turned pale when she saw her father-in-law. The little princess had much changed. She was rather more bad than good-looking now. Her cheeks sagged, her nose rose up, and her eyes were drawn down. "Yes, a sort of heaviness," she replied to the prince's question of how she felt. "Do you need anything?" "No, merci, mon Pierre." "Well, all right, all right." He left and went to the servants' rooms. Alpatych, his head bowed, was standing in the servants' rooms. "Has the road been covered?" "It has, Your Excellency." "Forgive me, for God's sake. It was only my stupidity." The prince cut him short and laughed his unnatural laugh. "Well, it's all right, all right." He offered his hand for Alpatych to kiss and went to his study. In the evening, Prince Vasily arrived. He was met on the avenue, as they called the front drive, by the coachmen and servants, who, with shouts, dragged his carts and sleigh to the wing over the road that had been deliberately covered with snow. Prince Vasily and Anatoly were given separate rooms. Anatoly, having taken off his tunic, sat with arms akimbo before a table, at a corner of which, smiling, he directed fixedly and distractedly his beautiful big eyes. He looked upon his whole life as ceaseless entertainment, which somebody for some reason had taken it upon himself to arrange for him. Now, too, he looked in this way upon this journey to the wicked old man and the rich, ugly heiress. All this, as he supposed, might turn out very nice and amusing. "And why shouldn't I marry her if she's very rich? That never hurts," thought Anatoly. He shaved, scented himself with a thoroughness and foppishness that had become habitual to him, and with his innately good-humored and triumphant expression, carried his handsome head high, went into his father's room. Two valets were bustling around Prince Vasily, dressing him. He himself looked around animatedly and nodded cheerfully to his entering son, as if to say, "Right, that's how I need you to look." "No, without joking, father, is she very ugly, eh?" he asked in French, as if continuing a conversation they had had more than once during the journey. "Enough nonsense! Above all, try to be respectful and sensible with the old prince." "If he starts being abusive, I'll leave," said Anatoly. "I can't stand these old men, eh? Remember, for you, everything depends on this." By that time, in the maids' quarters, not only was everything known about the arrival of the minister and his son, but their external appearances had already been described in detail. Princess Maria sat alone in her room, vainly trying to overcome her inner excitement. "Why did they write? Why did Liza tell me about it all? It just can't be," she kept saying to herself, looking in the mirror. "How will I come out to the drawing room? Even if I liked him, I couldn't be myself with him now." The mere thought of her father's gaze terrified her. The little princess and Mademoiselle Bourrienne had already received all the necessary information from the maid Masha about what a ruddy, dark-browed, handsome fellow the minister's son was, and how his papa could barely drag his feet up the stairs while he, like an eagle, ran up after him, taking 3 steps at a time. On receiving this information, the little princess and Mademoiselle Bourrienne, their animatedly chattering voices heard already from the corridor, came into Princess Maria's room. Ils sont très Marie. Do you know? Said the little princess, waddling in with her belly and lowering herself heavily into an armchair. She was no longer in that smock she had on this morning, but was wearing one of her best gowns. Her hair was carefully done, and in her face there was animation, which, however, did not conceal the sagging and deadened contours of her face. In a costume she used to wear in Petersburg society, it was still more noticeable how far she had lost her good looks. Mademoiselle Bourrienne's costume had undergone some sort of inconspicuous improvement, which made her fresh, pretty face still more attractive. Et bien, et vous restez comme vous étiez, chérie princesse? She said. On va venir annoncer que ces messieurs sont au salon. Il faudrait descendre, et vous ne faites pas une petite brine de toilette. The little princess got up from the armchair, rang for the maid, and began hurriedly and cheerfully devising a costume for Princess Maria and carrying it out. Princess Maria felt insulted in her sense of her own dignity because the arrival of the promised suitor excited her, and she was still more insulted that her 2 friends did not suppose it could have been otherwise. To tell them how ashamed she was of herself and of them would mean to betray her excitement. Besides, to refuse the dressing up they suggested would lead to prolonged bantering and insistence. She flushed, her beautiful eyes faded, her face became covered with blotches, and with that unattractive expression of a victim which most often lingered on her face, she gave herself into the power of Mademoiselle Bourrienne and Lisa. The 2 women concerned themselves, in all sincerity, with making her beautiful. She was so plain that the thought of rivalry with her did not occur to either of them. They therefore undertook to dress her up in all sincerity, with the naive and firm conviction of women that clothes can make a face beautiful. No, really, ma bonne amie, this dress won't do, Lisa said, looking sideways at the princess from a distance. Have them bring the maroon one you've got there. Really, why, this must just be the deciding of your fate in life. And this is too light. It won't do. No, it won't do. And what would not do was not the dress, but the face and the whole figure of the princess. But neither Mademoiselle Bourrienne nor the little princess sensed that. It seemed to them that if a blue ribbon was put in the hair, done up high, and a blue scarf hung down on the brown dress, and so on, all would be well. They forgot that the frightened face and figure could not be changed, and therefore no matter how they changed the frame and decoration of that face, the face itself remained pitiful and unattractive. After 2 or 3 changes, to which Princess Maria submitted obediently, when her hair had been done up high, a style that totally changed and spoiled her face, and she was wearing the blue scarf and fancy maroon gown, the little princess walked around her twice, straightened a fold here, pulled at the scarf there with her little hand, and, inclining her head, looked now from this side, now from that. No, it's impossible, she said resolutely, clasping her hands. Non, Marie, décidément, ce ne vous va pas. Je vous aime mieux dans votre petite robe grise de toutes les jours. Nom de grace, faites-le pour moi. Katya, she said to the maid, bring the princess her little grey dress, and watch, Mademoiselle Bourrienne, how I'm going to arrange it, she said, with a smiling foretaste of artistic delight. But when Katya brought the dress requested, Princess Maria was still sitting motionless before the mirror, looking at her face, and saw in the mirror that tears had welled up in her eyes and her mouth was trembling, getting ready to weep. Voyons, chérie princesse, said Mademoiselle Bourrienne, encore un petit effort. The little princess, taking the dress from the maid's hand, was approaching Princess Maria. No, now we'll have to make it simple and sweet, she said. Her voice, Mademoiselle Bourrienne's, and Katya, who was laughing with something, blended into a merry warbling which resembled the song of birds. Non, laissez-moi, said the princess. and there was so much seriousness and suffering in her voice that the birds' warbling immediately ceased. They looked at her big, beautiful eyes, filled with tears, and thought, looking at them clearly and pleadingly, and understood that to insist would be useless and even cruel. Armand changeait la coiffure, said the little princess. Je vous déteste, she said with reproach, turning to Mademoiselle Bourienne. Marie, à une de ces figures auxquelles ce genre de coiffure ne va pas du tout, mas du tout, changer de graisse. Laissez-moi, tout c'est m'est parfait égal, answered a voice barely holding back its tears. Mademoiselle Bourienne and the little princess had to confess to themselves that as she was, Princess Maria looked very bad, worse than ever, but it was already late. She looked at them with that expression they knew, an expression of thought and sadness. This expression did not inspire any fear of Princess Maria in them. She never inspired that feeling in anyone, but they knew that when that expression appeared on her face, she became silent and unshakable in her decisions. Vous changerez, n'est-ce pas? Said Lisa, and when Princess Maria made no reply, Lisa left the room. Princess Maria remained alone. She did not carry out Lisa's wish, and not only did not change her hairstyle, but did not even look at herself in the mirror. Strengthlessly lowering her eyes and arms, she sat silently and thought. She imagined a husband, a man, a strong, dominating, and incomprehensibly attractive being, suddenly carrying her off into his own completely different, happy world. Her own baby, like the one she had seen yesterday at her nurse's daughter's. She imagined at her own breast. The husband stands and looks tenderly at her and the baby. But no, it's impossible. I'm too plain, she thought. Please come to tea. The prince will come out shortly, said the maid's voice outside the door. She roused herself and was horrified at what she had been thinking, and before going downstairs, she stood up, went to her icon room, and fixing her eyes on the dark, lamp-lit face of a large icon of the Savior, stood before it with clasped hands for several minutes. There was tormenting doubt in Princess Maria's soul. Was the joy of love, of earthly love for a man, possible for her? Thinking of marriage, Princess Maria dreamed of family happiness and children, but her chiefest, strongest, and most secret dream was of earthly love. This feeling was all the stronger the more she tried to conceal it from others and even from herself. My God, she thought, how can I suppress these devil's thoughts in my heart? How can I renounce evil imaginings forever, so as peacefully to do thy will? And she barely asked the question when God answered her in her own heart. Desire nothing for yourself. Do not seek, do not worry, do not envy. The future of people and your own fate must be unknown to you, but live so as to be ready for anything. If God should see fit to test you in the duties of marriage, be ready to fulfill his will. With this reassuring thought, but still with the hope that her forbidden earthly dream would be fulfilled, Princess Maria sighed, crossed herself, and went downstairs without thinking about her dress or her hairstyle or how she would walk in or what she would say. What could all that mean in comparison with the predestination of God, without whose will not one hair falls from man's head? And that is where we will end it for today, on that solemn note. Well, quite a bit of hubbub. And as was noted in the comments, that some of that really happened quite fast. And all of a sudden, a couple months later, Pierre's married. Poor Princess Maria. I kind of feel bad for her. She just seems to have, she's kind of a sad character who's, I guess she sounds just very repressed and, made to feel, perhaps plainer or uglier than even she might be. And it's sad. And I feel bad because Anatoly's the only suitor that's been mentioned for her, and he sounds like such a scallywag that I'm I want you to be happy, but I don't want him for you. Oh no, girl, you deserve better. Anyways, and that's our Friday. So stay tuned on Monday at 3. We will pick up from there and see how far we'll get on Monday. Well, we'll pick up on 4 and do at least 4 and 5, and maybe we'll do 6. See how it goes. But yeah, that's all for today. Thank you guys so much. Stay tuned to the channel on Monday at 3 for our next reading. And in the meantime, you can always refresh yourself with the War and Peace playlist on my channel. Thanks. Have a great weekend. Bye.